So duty of care was owed. Were they one of those 4 people? The duty of care was breached. Did they fall below the reasonably practicable duty of care that would be expected in a venue of its size, nature and capacity? That breach led directly to the injury or loss, and we'll talk about the neighbour principle in a while. And now the judge has to decide how much. So when you get a solicitor's letter in, if you've ever seen a solicitor letter comes in the thing, it'll go along these lines. On this day, at this time, my client was a visitor to your premises. Duty of care is owed. On the day, there was a spillage inside the door, which had been left unintended for a number of minutes. Negligently unattended, I'll add, yeah? With no supervision, no care, and no equipment around it. Duty of care was breached. Due to this negligent behaviour, my client slipped and broke his leg. Your breach caused his injury. We now call upon you to admit liability fully in this case and pay us compensation in the sum of, and they'll pick this astronomical amount that they have no hope of ever getting. But so rule number 1 in negotiating, start high and work your way backwards, you know. Then they'll go into court and they'll do a bit of bargaining beforehand, and they'll both have witnesses and expert witnesses and people that they bring in the side, and they'll try to come to a negotiation that suits everybody and the legal parties and stuff like that. And if they can't, it's going to go into court for a judge to decide. How much did you contribute? How much did they contribute? And that's sometimes where you can get these mad payments come out in court where they kind of go, how in the name of Jesus did he come up with that figure? You know? I'm sure most of you have come across the Little Island burglar case. Most of you have come across this, one of Ireland's most famous civil law. Most of you are familiar with Little Island, yeah? So I'm going back to 1998. Can I use a flip chart? It's not going to block you out, Dylan, if I use that flip chart. So back to 1998, Little Island in Cork. Richie was about 40 at the time, I think. So it was... Guy is walking along, this man out 3 o'clock in the morning, mind his own business, walk along the roof of factory. Midnight walk along the roof of this factory. Not doing anyone any harm. Walk along the roof, and unfortunately, on the night in question, the factory had a skylight that had been open during the day. They'd forgotten to lock the skylight. The guy stepped on it, the lock gave way, he fell through, paralysed. You know? Gets arrested, whatever the case might be, brought to court, whatever the charges, was he convicted in criminal court or whatever. But he takes a claim against the factory for his injuries or losses. You know? Letter comes in. On the night in question, my client was a trespasser on your curtilage, so he is owed a duty of care not to do anything reckless that might endanger his safety. You had negligently failed to secure your building to an extent where it wasn't a risk to other people because you breached your own procedure by leaving your skylight open. Due to your negligence, my client fell 1.5 stories and broke his leg and he's paralysed from the waist down. Everybody say, ah. We now call on you to admit liability in this case and pay us the princely sum of astronomical sum. I'm not going to give the exact sums. So they'll bring in a loss assessor, bish bash bosh, shorty come, loss of income. What do you do for a living? I'm a builder. How much do you earn? €500. Now you're 30 years old, you're going to be out of work for the next 36 years till retirement age, whatever it is. But you can claim disability pension, so we're going to take that off. I'm going to say your loss of income over the next 36 years is going to be, let's call it an even million. Medical. Healthcare, physio, all that kind of stuff for the next 30 years. We'll call it an even 300. We'll be generous. And then damage. How has this affected your life? Can't play soccer anymore, my girlfriend left me, you know, can't walk, used to do a lot of jogging, that's out the window now. Let's call it an even 200. So total, buddy, you're out by 1.5 million. Goes to court, judge looks at it and goes, okay, yeah, there's liability there, contributory negligence, they shouldn't have left the skylight open, but 95% of this, buddy, is your fault. You were on a roof, it was unsafe, no risk assessment, no method statement, no safe system of work, no PPE, no supervision. You were trespassing, you shouldn't have been there, and you know it. All they did wrong was leave a skylight open. So you're 95% responsible. They are 5% responsible. But 5% of 1.5 million is still 75 grand. Give that man 75 grand. And that's how they work it out. That's how occupiers' liability works. It's based on the outcome, the amount of loss or damage that's caused, not what you might think of the person who caused it or did it, you know. So even you can have a very little liability. I worked for a retailer one time. We lost €9,000 to a lady who fell on a grape dropped by her own child. She was looking for 90, she got 9. She walks in the door of this retailer. On the door, on the window on the way in, is a sign that says no food and drink in the shop. She walks past that sign. Maybe she didn't see it, maybe she did. She gets to the first makeup counter, has a look at a bit of makeup. Cashier comes over, everything okay? Yeah, just looking, no problem. On she goes to the next makeup counter. Has a look, cashier comes over, everything okay? Yeah, just looking. Walks in further, child is eating a punnet of grapes. Child drops the grape, wheels over the grape with the buggy, steps on the grape, her foot slips back, the buggy goes forward, and she does the old face break technique, using your face to break your fall. It's never a good idea. Does a fair bit of damage, broken nose, busted eye sockets, you know, black eyes, etc., and she sues. Negligence. Failed in her duty of care to her. Why? She got 10%. She was judged to be 90% responsible for her own fault, 10%. The retailer was responsible. There you go. You have a policy clearly signed on the way in your door. That lady walked up to 2 staff members, both of whom had the opportunity to enforce that policy. If either of those staff members had have enforced that policy, she wouldn't have slipped. So you were at least 10% responsible for her injury or loss. 90% is her own fault, she should have been looking where she was going, but 10% you're responsible for it. And that's the way occupiers' liability is worked out. She's looking for 90, give her 10. Now, I can't remember how they divvied up the costs in cases like that, but unless she had her costs awarded against the retailer as well, she's actually down money. You know, it's going to cost you probably 15 grand to go to the circuit court anyway, you know, in terms of, you know, legal costs and stuff like that, you know. So that's how they're going to work it out. Very, very famous case, or one of the things that's very fundamental, is what's called the neighbour principle. Negligence is based on the neighbour, liability is based on the neighbour principle. And the neighbour principle basically goes, how close in proximity were you to this person? You only owe duty of care to people who are neighbours to you. So what I mean is people who are in close proximity and who could be affected by what you do. So if that person slips in your shop, they were in close proximity to where your duty of care lay, so they're responsible. But let's just say that they had a kid that couldn't be collected from school, and that kid was taken away by child services because the parent never collected it from school. Are you responsible for that because you fell? No, because that's outside of the neighbourly principle of the proximity of what's related to your duty of care. So you might be responsible for the initial impact of that person, but you're not responsible for any of the knock-on impacts that go any further, even if people do try to claim for them. It's a famous case in Adamstown in Dublin from a number of years back of a burglar who died breaking into a house. He attempted to climb in a bedroom window that was left open, fell back out the window and strangled himself on the cord of the blind. It was in all the newspapers, I don't know if I remember. And his family attempted to sue the homeowner for loss of future earnings. Yeah. From the burglar. They would sue for anything, you know. And it was thrown out of court. The argument was that they created liability by leaving their bedroom window open, so they created an opportunity for a burglar to break in, and the judge threw it out of court in a circumstance like that. Because on the neighbour principle, yes, they may have been responsible. If your man had, you know, lived, he could have taken a case and he probably wouldn't have won much, but they're not responsible for the future earnings of his family because the neighbour principle comes into effect, you know. People are often amazed by the things that people will sue you for in this country or around this country. So, essential elements of duty of care. So, first one and most important one here is foreseeability. Is it foreseeable that something like this could happen? This is a big thing that I argue with companies quite a bit in terms of what they provide to their clients and how to do contract risk assessments and stuff like that. You will have a client, let's just say, I'll give an example of a retail client or a door client. Door client's a good example. Pub rings up and says, we want one doorman on a Saturday night from 12 o'clock or from 8 o'clock till 2 o'clock, let's just say. One person on their own, trained PSA licensed person. And they go, yeah, okay, seems okay, we're going to supply that person. You go, okay, what do you want that person to do for you on your premises? Okay, well, I want that person to refuse access. Okay, yeah, we can do that, no problem. I want that person to monitor the crowd. Yeah, no problem, we can do that. I want that person to keep an eye out for drugs. Yeah, no problem, we can do that. And I want that person to break up any fights that might happen in the venue between people. And you go, hang on a second now. So you want me to take my insurance and apply it to a member of my staff who you want to go into a situation where he's outnumbered and people are already violent and under the influence of alcohol. Potentially drugs. If you're doing a job right in the first place, not drugs. But yes, you're right. Alcohol and drugs have always gone together. And I say, yes, well, okay. How am I going to then defend myself if he goes to break up that fight and he gets hurt and he takes a case against me? How am I going to defend that? You know? Did you give him any training? Yeah, I sent him on a physical training course. And what did he learn? Well, he learned that when we're taking people out, we get two of us and we get one each side and we take them out the front door, because that's what any responsible physical training course will tell you. Yeah? Nobody says that you're not able to take a person on your own. We're saying that it's not a lone walking activity. Same as arresting a shoplifter. Arresting a shoplifter is not a lone walking activity. The risk involves the use of force. Use of force is not a lone walking activity. You know, in terms of health and safety law, if you get injured while you're doing those things, there's risk and liability for your employer. You know, which is why a lot of retailers are moving to no arrest policies, but you can argue the common sense of that as well. So foreseeability, people say, sure, look, how was I going to know he was going to get hurt breaking up these two people? Have you seen fights before? Yeah. Do people generally get hurt in fights? Yeah. You know, was it foreseeable he was going to get hurt? Yeah. Person walk around a building site at night, you know, tell him, bring your own torch to work, we don't supply torches, off you go. Is it foreseeable that he might have an accident walking around the building site at night? Yeah. So should you provide him with the equipment? So there's your risk assessment in it. You know, is it likely that this might happen? Therefore, I should be doing something about it. And that's the number one rule of liability. The severity, how severe is the injury that might happen if it goes wrong? You know? Okay, is he going to get hurt feelings or is he going to die? You know? The cost of eliminating the risk, that has to be borne in mind as well. That is coming up more and more often in human rights and discrimination cases. There was one in a venue, a nightclub in Galway a number of years back. I don't know what the name of it was at the time. It was the Bentley or Cuba. It was that particular venue. Anyway, you walk in the front door of the venue and there's 34 steps. And a gentleman arrived in a wheelchair and was refused entry to the premises. And he asked why, and he was told in no uncertain terms, it's because you're in a wheelchair. You know. And they were right, it was. You know, they couldn't physically get him into the premises. And he took a case, as he's entitled to do, and he lost the case. He says, because they were asked, how many wheelchair users do you get rocking up to your door in a year? And he said, he's the first one this year. We might get one every year. Is it socially expected, is it reasonable to expect you to install a 20,000, 30,000 euros wheelchair lift in your venue for the one person a year who may arrive in a wheelchair? Does that sound reasonably practical to a one-person venue? No. So therefore, it's not reasonable to eliminate the risk, so it's not discriminatory. You know, if it was a big chain pub, like let's say a Witherspoons or a chain branch, then that might be a different conversation. But it's a one pub owner venue, you know, type of a thing. You know, the social utility of your conduct, what you were doing at the time that caused the injury. You know, you knock somebody over walking through a busy room. There's liability there. Security staff knock somebody over. Security person knocks somebody over while trying to prevent somebody from punching somebody else. Much less liability because the social utility of what you were attempting to do at the time was in place. Does that make sense? So look, I was trying to do the right thing and unfortunately somebody got hurt. That's the social utility argument. Like a drunk driver who knocks somebody down has a much higher liability than an ambulance driver on lights and sirens who's attempting to get to an incident, you know. And then common practice comes in. What are your peers doing? You know, what are other people in a similar job with a similar capacity to you? What level of service are they providing? Is it better, worse, or on par with you? That's not always a get out of jail free card. Just because everyone's doing it wrong doesn't make it right, you know. But it's a good practice that you can go on to look around and look, I have this capacity, I have this amount of money to spend. Other people have a similar capacity and similar amounts of money are doing similar things to me, you know. That comes up quite a lot in hotels, the difference between family-owned hotels and chain hotels and the standard of care that's owed to the guests in terms of staffing and stuff like that, you know, and liability that exists with that. You will often have family-run hotels but will have a single staff member in them overnight, like, you know, and that will be it, you know. So responding to things like fire evacuations, stuff like that, you know, the fire officer has to look at it and go, yeah, look, you're doing what's reasonable for a hotel of your capacity. But if you're a big chain hotel with 550 rooms and you say, yeah, we just have the one fella, it's absolutely fine. The fire officer will be looking at you going, cop yourselves on, lads, right? You know, let's put some people in the hotel at night, you know. So they're the kind of elements of a duty of care. But it's important for every premises, I suppose, and every client and every venue and every security company. Look, what's reasonably practical for me? What's reasonably practical for a small, family-owned local security company is not the expectation of the big two, you know, your big venues and stuff like that. They have capacity and resources to provide extra duty of care and they're expected to do so, you know. It's not always a get out jail free card, I couldn't afford to do it, or in principle I couldn't do it, or whatever the case might be, but it's a good starting point if nothing else, you know. Ideal world, you have best practice and common practice. Best practice tends to be ideal world stuff, you know. Up there in the clouds, ideally, I'd love to have a security person for every person in the venue, just to keep an eye on them, you know. What's best practice out there is not always achievable for places, like, you know. We'd all love to have a security control room with CCTV and monitors and defibs and extinguishers and all that kind of stuff and in it, you know, but it's not reasonably practical. It's nice in you know, in theory to get, you know, but it's not always practical. Common practice is very real world, but it's not always right. There's lots and lots of stuff out there in the security industry that's mythological, that's just grown up. You know, we've all been told those stories. Who remembers that famous one about it's illegal to wear steel-toe boots on a door because they're classed as a weapon? Anyone ever heard that one before? That was one of my personal favourites. You know, there's case law behind that, like, you know, there's actual case law behind it. It makes no sense in law, but there was a case, I'm going back about 25 years in Dublin. Doorman kicked a guy in the face with a steel-toe boot and fractured his face. And he was charged with aggravated assault for using the boot as a weapon. Yeah? And the story went around that it was illegal to wear steel-toe boots on the door because they were classified as a weapon. You know, it's not illegal to wear a steel-toe boot; it's illegal to kick somebody in the face with a steel-toe boot. You know, he's learned something new. Ah, no. Common practice isn't often resource-based. It's based on, look, this is just what we do. We've always done it this way. This has always been the case. Not always the case. I know of venues that have gotten in real trouble, particularly where alcohol is concerned, where they do things like they find somebody who's unconscious drunk and they think, well, I have a liability for him when he's on the premises, so if I get him off the premises, I'm no longer liable for him. Problem solved. You know, that's not the way it works. Yeah? Or I've known places that have created liability from themselves by seizing drugs from people on the way in the door and retaining those drugs on the premises. I know of a head doorman who almost got himself in serious trouble because they used to retain the drugs in little Ziploc bags and write the person's name, address and contact numbers for them, and at the end of a month they'd bring them to the local Garda station. So he's on the way to his local Garda station one day with a cash box on the passenger seat of the car, stopped at a checkpoint, opens up, and inside is little Ziploc bags filled with drugs with people's names, addresses and telephone numbers in the bags. So just because something is common practice and other places do it, doesn't make it a good idea to do it, you know. Vicarious liability, like I said, so the relationship and control is important here. Was the staff member acting in accordance with their employer's wishes? Even if they weren't, did they think they were? And there's two famous cases that are associated with that. One is the Allender case from the UK. And go back to the 1970s there. Doorman who saw his ex-girlfriend's new boyfriend in the venue and decided to put him in hospital, basically. You know, did so, and your man sued the venue, and the venue was found to be not liable because they couldn't have predicted or foresaw. It had nothing to do with his duty. He wasn't acting. Your man, he had no interaction with him in the course of his duty. He just attacked him. Opposite end of the case. Crystal nightclub case last year in Dublin. Anyone see it? Two door staff who attacked a couple outside the door, beat the two of them up, went to court, big award made against them. Even though they'd followed the couple down the road and physically assaulted them, the club was found to be liable. Why? Because there was more than one, first of all, so it wasn't personal, there's more than one security member involved in it. Yeah. Secondly, it was due to the fact that the issue had started with a refusal. They'd refused, they had attacked the door staff restrained them, they'd walked off and thrown something back at the doorman and they went down. So they said because the first interaction was in the course of their duty, they were responsible for the next interaction. They should have had control over their security staff because the relationship of control exists. Somebody should have been in control to tell the security staff, do not go down that street after them. So the club was found to be liable because it was a secondary incident. So that's where vicarious liability doesn't always cover you. There's a very strange legal term there called frolic. If an employee goes on a frolic, which means goes way outside the relationship of control, the employer could never have predicted they were going to do it and completely told them that they shouldn't do it. That's what a frolic is. In general reduction, I suppose some of the stuff, know what your duty of care is, risk is, they're pretty straightforward stuff. This is an important one that I always encourage people to do. Like, if you're going to do something new, ring your insurer going, I was thinking of doing this, what do you think of it? Insurers are usually pretty helpful when it comes. They'll tell you straight up, no, that's a really bad idea. Don't do that, Or they'll say, yeah, that's not bad. We'll engage with one of our experts and we'll get another opinion for you. And they'll ring a consultant up and they'll say, what do you think of this? Does it risk? Because bear in mind, insurance companies know nothing about the business or the industry that you're in. They take the opinion of experts and they go on what liability is, what liability arises for them. They ring you up and say, what risk could arise from this? And I'll explain it to them, or somebody else will explain it to them, and they go, okay, yeah, that creates a liability for us. We're going to tell them his premiums going up, But don't be afraid of doing it. And this one here is huge for me. Record keeping. They're the things that save you. Negligence risk, I suppose, risk assessment, we already taught proper risk assessment, but this is huge. And it's one, I hope I spelt it right. I always spell that word wrong. I'm not even sure if it's right. Contemporaneous evidence is a huge thing. The notes taken at the scene of an accident or incident. Security staff, I find these days, I don't know, is it a literacy thing? Is it a nerves thing? They are petrified of using notebooks, their own notebooks. Years ago, you used to get a security person, they'd have notebooks filled with notes and details and incidents and stuff like that. Now you go and look at a security person, it's empty. They have a shopping list, someone's phone number, games of X's and O's. They're playing against each other and they're walking around the shop, losing some of these games. Is that you, is it? X's and O's, huh? Alarm codes. Jesus. But contemporaneous evidence, having evidence from the time, simple things like witness details that took down to time. It's very strange the way courts look at contemporaneous evidence. They look at it and say, well, these notes were taken at a time when you had no reason to lie. You didn't know that this person was going to take a claim. So when you were taking the note, you had no reason to tell lies. So it's usually the most honest record of events. And they hold very much weight on those, which is why you're allowed to use them in witness boxes and stuff like that. And then in incident management, what happens after the process? I've recently set one up with a nightclub chain in Dublin where they have 4 nightclubs. And we talk about, well, okay, yes, you have an incident, but what happens after the incident is just as important, And even after complaints and stuff, I always encourage people, you're dealing with a customer, they want to shout, raw, give out about security. I would say, get out of jail free care for security. Would you like me to get my manager to give you a call about this? Yeah. Give me some details and I'll get them to give you a call and pass it. Get out of jail free card. You don't have to deal with them anymore. Then let the incident management process take over after that. Witness the incidents and stuff like that. How many people are reluctant to see an accident to go, can I just get your details? No, I don't want to give any details. Very simple ways. Yeah. Did you see what happened? Yeah. Are you okay? Yeah, I'm fine. Yeah. Come here. My boss might want to just ring and make sure that you're okay. Would you mind if I get a couple of details off you? It's how you get those details can be just as important as having them in the first place. And you have them contemporaneously. They go with the actual incident, and they'll always be together. So the incident management afterwards, how you document what you do afterwards. And I always say, look, for a manager, incident happened, reported to me at this time. Next day, telephone the person. This is what I said. 2 weeks later, telephone them. This is what I said to them. And having that document that comes in afterwards. Because when they go to a solicitor, they're going to make out you're the worst in the world. The solicitors, that's their jobs. The job is to do the best for their client. Your job is to say, well, actually, I made 4 phone calls to check on that person's welfare. I offered to pay for their medical care, and we paid for a taxi to and from the venue. We, will I tell that story? Yeah, I got time. We had a young lady, Q&A is going to be a bit short. We had a young lady one time who lost her sight in a nightclub I was working at. A guy threw a bottle off a balcony, smashed in her face, and she lost the eyesight in one of her eyes. Now, if she'd have taken a civil claim against that premises, you're probably talking $500,000 and upwards, I would say. And she never sued. Her family never sued. She was a first-year nursing student. Guy was up drinking on the balcony, drank his bottle of Heineken and chucked the empty Heineken bottle off the balcony. She was dancing on the dance floor. They hit her in the face. I was the security manager on duty that night. She was from Monaghan. She had no way of getting in touch with her parents. I got in the ambulance where we went up to A&E. I got details for her parents. We were ringing and ringing and ringing. We got her parents on the Sunday morning. The parents are saying, look, we've been drinking the night before. The car's still in town. We sent a taxi from Sligo Now this is a multinational hotel. We sent a taxi from Sligo to pick the parents up in Monaghan and drive them to Galway. We put the parents up in the hotel, paid for her things. She was in hospital for 3 or 4 weeks. They stayed in the hotel for free. We paid for her surgery. We paid for plastic surgery. They paid for the parents to stay in the hotel when they were there. All in all, it probably cost the hotel venue probably about 30 grand in terms of what didn't really cost them 30 grand, but in terms of if it was retail price, 30 grand. It saved them probably £500,000 in terms of how they treated them. Every week there was how is she this week? Does she need that? I think the hotel actually paid for her to go back and finish her nursing studies. They paid for her final 2 years in college when she went back. Probably cost them 5 grand, but probably saved them £500,000 in just going, look, how is she? We're genuinely concerned. We want to sort this out, rather than waiting for the solicitor's letter to come in and then having a defence afterwards. Being proactive in these things is a scary thing, but it's effective. It works for people. Defamation, the normal stuff. This is an interesting for understanding qualified privilege. Who's heard the phrase qualified privilege or is familiar with what is? So qualified privilege is the second best defence to defamation. Best defence to defamation is truth. I was telling the truth when I said it. Qualified privilege basically is where you make a statement to a person because you felt it was in their interest to hear it. Last year in Ireland, I think there was 51 defamation cases heard in the High Court against security providers or security people who were present at instance. Anyone want to know the number one most common situation for defamation claims? Racism? No, that'll be taken under equality. Most people think it's false arrest, it's not. EAS alarm activations, where security guard is tasked with the alarm goes off on the way out the door and the security guard goes out, steps in front of the person and says, you just set the alarm off, can you come back inside the store? We check and you don't have a security tag on it. Now, that is defamation. Standing in front of the person, asking them back inside the store, it's defamation in principle itself. You've reflected badly on that person's character just by standing in front of them. Qualified privilege. I've tried this with so many places. Security guard walks out behind the person, doesn't step in front and says, sorry, the alarm just went off there. We may have left a security tag on. Would you like a cashier to check for you? Qualified privilege. They have an interest in hearing that the alarm is going off. It's in their best interest to hear it, and that's what qualified privilege is. You make a statement because you think that the person has an interest in hearing it, not accusing them of doing any wrongdoing or anything like that, and then having an audit trail for that's followed up after, look, I asked this person back in, they didn't have a tag, etc., etc. So that's me finished.